Have here a 2003 Volkswagen Passat with a 1.8T. The customer came in for an overheating problem. We took a quick look at it and inspected the timing cover. Didn't really diagnose the overheating problem, but the timing belt was shot. And so we decided it'd be safer just to put a timing belt, water pump, rollers and stuff in it with a thermostat. Hopefully that fixed the overheating problem. As we took the car apart, we found that it had been wrecked in the front. The whole front cover is off a different car, I believe a later model car. There's underbody structure missing under here. It's really a butcher job. But now we're done with it. We're still left with an overheating problem. Slight unprofessionalism not diagnosing the problem beforehand, but I was very worried that the timing belt might break during test driving and stuff, so I didn't want to risk that. Let me show you the timing belt. So you can see here the inner edge. It's very worn right here. He's actually had this at the dealer and they tried to sell him a timing belt as well without diagnosing the problem. But here's the big thing. Look at that. Has been replaced before. It has a Gates emblem on it. Water pump had a metal impeller. It was aftermarket. Of course, we replaced all these parts here, including the thermostat, new seal for the thermostat, cam seal laying around there somewhere. This is a Passat 1.8T I'm doing a timing belt on, and I noticed that the bumper fit very poorly, and as I took it apart I realized it was a early bumper on a late car. I'm sorry, I realized it was a late bumper on an early car, and it was simply wire tied on, but obviously it's probably been wrecked in the front. Crappy repair job, put back together. They've obviously put a radiator in it. I think they used this late bumper cover because it was white, and so that's mighty convenient to put the car back together with a white bumper cover. Makes it nice and cheap. But unfortunately, the donor car was a manual transmission, so there's no transmission cooler lines. You probably can't see it up there, but there ain't transmission cooler lines up there. So what did they do with the transmission cooler lines? Well, here's what they did. I'm sure that kink right there is going to flow lots of cooler flow through there. Understand that cooler flow is very important. It lubricates some of the bearings inside the transmission. I don't care who you are, but don't put a car together like this, then sell it at auction, and then put some poor unsuspecting guy in a car that has a transmission time bomb. How rude. We're gonna, of course, fix this by installing an aftermarket cooler in the front. I don't really feel like buying a radiator for this. I'm sure the customer don't want to spend the money either, but something has to be done with that. I can't imagine that flowing oil through it very, very well, that's for sure. So here's the fix we did on this thing. Put an external cooler here, routed some hose there, connected it to the hoses there with some little adapters. It'll work good. But we're waiting for it to warm up again. It's getting pretty close there. 90 degrees. Thermostat should have been opened, or should be opening, and fans should come on eventually. Who knows if any of that works because of the condition of the front end. Should probably take a look at that now. There were a bunch of wires laying loose and stuff there. Pretty sure those are for the fog lights, and for these marker lights here, none of those work. Okay, we're starting to get warm now. 195, 196, 197, 197, 198, 199. Oh my gosh, we're really getting hot now. 200. 98 degrees Celsius. FYI, the temperature sensor the VAGCOM is reading is on the back of the head back here. And of course our gauge lies to us and says 190 even. Liar. It's buffered so it gives us a nice even temperature reading all the time so customers don't complain about a fluctuating temperature. In other words, it lies to us. But as our temperature gets hotter and hotter, our fans should be coming on. But as of yet, they haven't. Probably don't work due to the either a failed fan. Of course, this fan is mechanical. That fan over there is electrical. Probably don't work due to the quality front end repair that's been done here. Okay, we're getting really hot now. We're at 204 here at the head. I like to shoot that little section of the head right there to get a temperature. So here's our lower radiator hose coming out of the radiator. My hand does feel warm, not hot. There's our temperature, or our fan switch. Right here, this thing not plugged in is another fan switch that came from the donor car. Not used on this car, of course, but this is the fan switch for this car. Let's shoot this with the infrared thermometer and see what the temperature is. .92 degrees, 93, 94, 95. Let's see what the top is. Let's check the temperature again. .71 degrees. Let's check the temperature of the top. .144. And the temperature of the engine. .203, 204. VAGCOM says 110. That's too hot. And our gauge still lying to us. Let me check that again. .170, 180, 185, 187. And down on the bottom side, 101. 97. That's just not good enough. That's not flowing. Okay, I've got to the point where I'm not comfortable running the car anymore. Our lying temperature gauge has actually started showing it getting a little bit hot. Let's take one last look at the head versus the radiator, upper and lower. Okay, here's our head, 219, 220. Top of the radiator, 143, 150, 152. And lastly, down underneath, bottom side of the radiator, less than 100 degrees, 87 degrees, maybe 90, 89, 90. That is a clogged radiator. Could be a bad thermostat, but guess what? We put a thermostat in it. As the Passat got hotter, we had a 40 to 60 degree drop from the engine to the radiator and a 60 to approximately 87 degree drop from the inlet of the radiator to the outlet of the radiator. Obviously the heat from the engine should flow into the radiator, and when the engine is clearly overheating, the outlet of the radiator should be at least hot enough to turn on the fans. The low-speed fans come on at about 197 and the high-speed fans come on at 210. So if the engine's overheating and the radiator isn't at those temperatures, then there's a flow problem. We clearly have a flow problem with this car. A flow problem could be the water pump impeller broken or the thermostat stuck. We replaced both those items, so that pretty clearly leaves just the radiator. So we're going to make the call and replace the radiator on this car. I guess we need to check out the fans, see why they're not working. These things, the fan fails on them all the time, but that should be pretty easy to do. We just need a jumper right here. Focus camera. Just need a jumper right here, and that'll turn on the fans if it's good. Now this is a fan switch. It is not a temperature sensor. It does have temperature sensing elements in it, but all it does is move something mechanically in order to make connections of the switch to pass electricity through. Let me unplug this thing. Whoa, watch your fingers against that fan belt. It's a good way to lose a finger here, buddy. Safety third. Okay, what I've got is a paper clip that I've just shaped in order to be able to use it to touch the terminals. And I am just touching that, I'm not shoving it in there. I think you could probably hear that, especially on high speed. That's high speed there. That's low speed. It is working on both of those. So I've been walking by this radiator every day, and I got to thinking maybe there was something we could see if we pulled the caps off of it. Now I've already got the caps off this one, but I wanted to show you the inlet on this radiator is on the same side as the outlet. This radiator is our problem radiator, is the same way. And so what that means is the antifreeze comes in this side, this half of the radiator flows through, and then it enters the tank on the other side, and it flows back through the other half of the radiator, exiting out the outlet like that. So I pull the cap off, and even from this distance you can see something goofy's going on here. On this side of the radiator, clean. And then once you get down here, red crusty stuff. Not much of a blockage there. As I said, the radiator is basically cut in half, and then flows through this side to the tank to the other side, and then flows back to this side. But all that red crusty stuff could definitely clog this radiator. I haven't taken the other side apart yet. And of course, Volkswagen antifreeze is G12. It's supposed to be pink. And it's really good antifreeze. It lasts a long time, doesn't really cause problems unless it's mixed with green antifreeze. Now the antifreeze in this car was perfectly clear and pink, but this car has this radiator, because my assumption on this car was the radiator was changed after a front end collision. Well, there's no question about it, it was changed. That wasn't just my assumption. But this radiator is all green inside. Take a nice look at the tank. This is the tank that comes off the end of it. Right there. You can see inside the tank, you know, this is the incoming side, and then there's all that. And it's all pink. That's nice. And then on this side, completely green. We'll take the other tank off, see what it shows. Okay, and here I have the other side of the tank off. Just beautiful. Look at that. And inside the tank, crusties here in the bottom. That takes the cake right there. Now I wanted to say that fixing this car gave me a good sense of satisfaction. It was a rather unusual job with coming in with the timing belt problem, and obviously replacing that timing belt saved that customer from major engine damage. And then once we got it apart, we found the transmission cooler was bypassed, and there was a big kink in the line that they bypassed it with, and fixing that saved the customer from a transmission failure. And then diagnosing this radiator problem, I'm looking down here at the radiator, diagnosing this radiator problem was fun and not a normal diagnosis for me. I come from a transmission background, and so this is only the second clogged radiator I've ever diagnosed, and it was a good diagnosis. I was very sure in my diagnosis with the temperature gauge, but these type of diagnoses are hard. If you're using a temperature gun to measure flow through the radiator, you have to understand that temperature is going to drop as it goes across the radiator, but how much? Each radiator is going to be different. A Passat radiator is going to be different than a Jetta, and a Jetta radiator is going to be different than a Chevy and a Toyota. So you never know what a good reading is, so you have to make a judgment call on each one. Obviously on this one there was about a 20-degree drop across the radiator. That's with a good flowing radiator, but the bad flowing radiator, there was a much bigger drop. I'll have to review the videos to remember exactly how much drop there was. I might post it in text here. But this was a fun car for me. Gives me a lot of satisfaction fixing it, and I just wish the customer was a little bit more appreciative. He didn't like the fact that he was called back and sold a cooler, and he didn't like the fact that he was called back and sold a radiator, and even though he had been to the dealer and got a $1,200 estimate for a timing belt, and my cost for a timing belt was around $800, he still tried to negotiate price. He wanted the price lower up front, and of course I didn't negotiate. And then when he come to pick up the car, he wanted to negotiate using the fact that I called him and upsold him more work to negotiate more price. I really think I did a good job for this customer. A little unappreciative. He has other Volkswagens though where it was nice and cordial and everything, but certainly would be good if customers understood the good job I was doing for them and was a little bit more appreciative. Before I sign out, I want to go through the diagnostic process again real quick. The car did come in for an overheating problem, but the dealer had already suggested a timing belt based on the inner wear on the timing belt, which I showed you guys. I never really got the problem to happen. Test drive was awful short. Customers were actually waiting here while I was doing it, and I just can't allot that much time to them right then. So after we discovered the groove in the timing belt, not just the wear on the inner ring, we decided we didn't want to drive it any further, so we did the timing belt job. Customer okayed that. Most 1.8T timing belt jobs, we do a thermostat along with them also. So we were hoping the timing belt and the thermostat would take care of his overheating problem. Didn't really do a conclusive diagnosis. Didn't really want to drive the car and leave it running with a timing belt, risking damaging the engine the whole time. After the timing belt repair, the test drive did reveal that it was overheating still. It was a longer test drive on the highway and on side streets. And of course we did notice the fan wasn't working. We were able to jumper the fan and make the fan work, but since the radiator was not heating up to temperature and the fan control switch is on the back side of the radiator, meaning on the cooler side of the radiator, it was never heating up, so why would the fans come on? A few checks with temperature gun pretty much convinced me that it was a clogged radiator. Replacing the radiator did fix it. I need to reinforce that if you have pink G12 antifreeze in your Volkswagen, you need to use pink G12 antifreeze, or maybe a universal type antifreeze might be okay, but do not mix regular green antifreeze, conventional green antifreeze in that car, or your radiator will look like the one that I showed. If you want to see more Volkswagen videos, like and subscribe below, and also visit my website at www.kansascitytdi.com.